Good morning. My name is Richard, and I've got a little thought for the day based on a passage from Luke this morning. So you will certainly recognize the passage, and it's well known as Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. And we're just going to read from the Luke version, from the NIV version. So this is in Luke 22, verses 39 to 46, and I'll just read it to you first. This is, of course, just after the Last Supper, and Jesus goes off to pray, as he often did on the Mount of Olives, just stopping at the Garden of Gethsemane. So Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching this place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed. "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him, and being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. When he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray, so that you will not fall into temptation." Well, there we are. Isn't that what possibly the most poignant passage in the whole of the Gospels? To me, it has such powerful meaning of Jesus' real anguish, anxiety, and possibly terror, because we do believe that he had all the same emotions that us humans have. He was God in a human body, so had this huge torment of his emotions absolutely trying to overpower him, and the great belief that he must be obedient and to complete the mission that he's here for. So a real plea to God, as do you remember Jan in some of his recent sermons before he left talked about at any moment Jesus could have pressed the stop button on his mission and saved himself an agonizing death on the cross, but every time he of course didn't. But this was possibly the last chance that he could have pressed that stop button, but he was just saying to his Father, I think he just often in difficult times went off to pray alone, didn't he? And it was almost like touching base with the Father to say, is this going as it should, following your will? So this was the last chance, he said. Could there be another way without me having to go onto the cross? Possibly that was what he was behind this prayer, that could there be another way, but your will be done. And of course we take that, don't we, as literally a piece in our Lord's Prayer, your will be done on earth. So a hugely powerful passage. I think it's just enormously transferable to our lives when we have that torment and emotions pushing us in one direction, but we know that we should be following God's will, and that comes up so often. So we don't have to face the agonizing torment that Jesus went through. Don't forget, this was almost the worst torture that the Romans had invented. So to die on a cross like that, just absolutely agonizing, terrorizing to think about. So there we are. And then, of course, to add to all this, Jesus says to his disciples, beware temptation. And there they were, just falling asleep, just a stone's throw away from him. He asked them to stay and stand guard and just look out, and they just snoozed off. So add that into the torment, and it's just crazy. And he says to them again, doesn't he? Pray to be delivered from temptation. Of course, he knew that they would all walk away when he was in his last hour, and even Peter would deny him. So what horrible thoughts going on in his mind, and just it just highlights, doesn't it, that his incredible forbearance in going ahead with this mission and facing the criticism, the slapping around that the Roman soldiers gave him, and all that, and he just stood there, let it happen. At no point did he strike out and seek any sort of vengeance. So, to me, this is just hugely indicative of Jesus' character in a summary form. I mean, we see him through the Gospels doing so many compassionate things, and see his forbearance also with the criticism that he took from the Pharisees. But, isn't this just the highlight of all that, where he endures what he can see ahead because it is God's will? So, and it's interesting that all the Gospels cover this almost exactly the same, just very slight differences. Luke is the only one that reports he was sweating in his anguish, drops of blood that fell to the ground. And Luke, being a physician, would have possibly been aware of that condition. It is a known medical condition in times of huge stress and anguish, and possibly Luke was aware of that and wanted to explain it in his words. But there we are. So what do we take away from it ourselves? Well, clearly we don't face normally the same level of anguish and huge conflict of different things going on in our head that Jesus was facing at that point. But how many times have we faced that same kind of crossroads of, do we do what we want to do, or do we follow God's will? And I think that's the point we must reflect on today, that this is highlighted in technicolor and absolutely as clearly as possible to us, that choosing God's will is the way to go, and wrestling with that in our minds. Okay, well, that is my thought from this. I hope that is an inspiration for you today. It's a tough challenge, but we must take something from this passage, I think. So thank you very much, and God bless you. Goodbye.